Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the Rant. Today's Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, and Halloween is over. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. I am personally going to start putting up my Christmas decorations early because I plan on traveling a little bit in November and December. And I've got an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, so I could put Christmas decorations up after the 4th of July and they'd be okay with it.
I'm not going to do a damn thing with Christmas decorations. I hate decorating. I hate taking stuff down. I let my wife and the kids do that. Although I was just thinking about this because I saw a friend of mine just posted that she has put up her Christmas tree. And I was just thinking, like, I want to go back and get like a real tree again this year. We don't do that very often. We got a fake tree, but it just kind of sucks. Like, it's just like, you gotta put the stupid branches in and do them. Like, this is a pain in the ass. Like, a real tree's a pain in the ass, but at least when it's done, I can chop it up and burn it in the burn pit or something. At least it serves a purpose, so we'll see.
And it smells good. It makes the house very fragrant.
Yeah, and the cats can climb up in it and stuff. So,
that's always fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be great for our shaggy ass cat with all his fur to climb up in there and get sap on it. That'll work out just swimmingly. So we'll see.
Honey, what's this sticky stuff on the cat?
Yeah, like why is it's
birds dive bombing it?
Like, we had to buy a whole new vacuum because, and I'm serious, like, this cat sheds like nobody's business, and they're just like, they'll wrestle around and there's just clumps of hair all over the place. Like, you could just see, like, oh, clearly here's where he was sleeping. But he's a great cat, so it's fun either way. But yeah, it's and it's been the last few days I've had frost on my windows. I've had to start my car early to take the kids to the bus stop and stuff.
Yowza.
So but it's not, it's like 36, so it's very crisp, and it's not at that point. It's not like windy, or anything like that. And so it's not a bad cold yet. But to me, the worst part of days like this are like, I think the high today is only maybe in the 50s, and it's going to get up to 60 by the end of the week. But it's like it's 60 at 4:00, and the sun goes down, about 6:30. Like, but the moment the sun drops past the horizon, it drops like 20 degrees. You're like, holy shit, it's cold. And so that's not super fun, but it was great. I mean, Thanksgiving, Halloween, set the fire pit up at the end of the driveway, had the kids come by and stuff, and play a little scary music, and had some chili cooking. I had spent almost 2 weeks making some apple cinnamon bourbon, and so I added that to a little cider and had some of that. It was great. It's great. I enjoy it as it's getting cooler. So anyway,
so as Phoenix Night Flame, a listener or watcher, pointed out, 5-year anniversary to the greatest game ever played, and I happened to be at that game, sitting right behind home plate, and it was magnificent. But what I was pointing out to a friend the other day is that, like, if you were watching the game from home, you can go back and watch that game again and kind of relive the experience. But for people who were at the game, it's like, that's an inadequate way to relive the experience. I can never relive. Now, I will say that being there obviously is, I would say, better than watching it on TV. But that being said, it's only a one-time experience. You can never relive it. Like, I've tried to, like, watching the game on TV, and it's just different. Like, the announcers come into play, and just, kind of their commentary and just all the other things. It's just, so I'm kind of sad in that way. Is that weird?
No, I don't think so. I think there are certain things. It's like saying, different. So, take this context for whatever you want, but like, you could watch videos or look at pictures of you holding a newborn, your newborn son or daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's you can't go back to that moment. You talk about it, you think about it, but it's like, there, like you said, though, there's a very different context to it, because if you watched the game on television or whatever, or you listen to it on the radio, whatever the case was, like, that is your context for the game. And so you're getting a direct repeat, or maybe you're seeing, if you listen to it on the radio and you watch the game, or if you watch the game, you listen to it on the radio. But yeah, it's different, but I will say, and I was not there, which I regret at times, although I don't, because the games that I attended, they lost. And so I like, this is part of my superstition, was that I was like, if I go, they'll lose. And I went to 1 and 4, both started by Corey Kluber, just as 7 was. And I was like, if I go and make this happen, they'll lose, because they lost both games I went to when Kluber was there. And I was watching it in a bar, this bar restaurant. They had set aside, like they were taking reservations, set aside seats for me and everything. And the guy had poured me a drink and gave it to me. But when the game went to rain delay, I was like, I got to go. And, and part of that was because I was, I could have gotten an Uber, but the guy who had gone there was like, hey, I got to go, man. And I was in no condition to drive, certainly. And so, but I told him, I said, if I leave, they'll win. It's like, I can't stay, because it just got tied up, and I have to go. And if I leave, they will win. And I got home in time to see that happen. So, like, I'm generally not big on superstitions, but that's kind of one of those things where I'm like, I will say this: I've only ever watched highlights. I've never sat back and watched the game all over again. I've seen all the highlights, obviously, as we all have. But I think everybody kind of relives that differently, or everybody wants to celebrate it differently. And I don't think any of that's right or wrong or whatever, right? We all had our own. I think the big thing with this one, and I know people are like, oh, it's going to be like the 85 Bears. Okay, maybe. But it is different for a number of reasons. But I think each of us has a lot of our own personal stuff that we brought into that whole thing, right? Whether that be just for you and your own individual experience, whether that be because you felt like you were carrying generations of previous fans and family through that. And so, I just, yeah, man, whatever. Like, I'm not, but at the same time, like, I'm not watching. It's like, it's cool and people are talking about it. Like, I don't think I'm really going to, I'm wearing this hat and I put it on for this podcast, for this video. But I also don't want, that's the greatest sporting event that I've ever witnessed, that I've ever felt. That's the most emotion I've ever felt for any one game. However, I also don't want to sit here and rest on that and continue to celebrate that, knowing that the Cubs still have so much more that they've got to do, and seeing what they've done over the last 5 years and how they've kind of failed to maintain that. So anyway, I've got mixed feelings going into it. So
I kind of come out the same place there at the end, is that, I love that the Cubs won the 2016 World Series, but I am getting sick of celebrating it, to be honest with you. And I think it's great. Like, everybody can kind of do their own thing, like you said. But I don't want it to become a thing where every year that's the thing we have to look back on, because we're not there currently. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of, to me, and I'm probably going to insult some people with this, it kind of starts to fall more into that lovable loser type thing of accepting kind of where we are, holding on to that what we had, and maybe that's not it. Maybe just people like to, celebrate the World Series and everything. And I get it, but I want to celebrate something more current, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Ideally. But I think, and it's, and this is taken. So I don't want to tell anybody, again, if you want to celebrate it, if you want to relive that, absolutely, by all means, man, have fun with it and enjoy that, because it was such a tremendous thing. But at the same time, I look at it, and the real pessimist in me says, that's exactly what Tom Ricketts wants you to do. He wants you to be happy with that, and to just revel in 5 years ago and forget about now. When again, they've absolutely shit the bed when it comes to maintaining any of that stuff. And again, hopefully there are some things that can be done. Mike Cantor, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he's got in the piece personally, but that's kind of the whole point. Is in the rundown today, he's got a series of moves in there that the Cubs could make, and a lot of that, again, a lot of this is like, hey, let's connect these dots, right? And if you're the one who's putting the dots out, well, you can kind of make that picture look however you want. And kudos to him for spending the time to do that and to kind of put those things together. That's not my jam. So I'm glad that he does it, because I like reading that stuff. I enjoy editing that piece every morning because it gives me a really good start to it. But he does lay some of those things out. So it's interesting to kind of look at the different ways that could maybe go. Who could they pick up? How could they make some of these things happen? Again, if we look at this, sans potential disruption in the actual work because of the CBA and all that stuff. So, we'll see what happens. But it's hopefully they give us something to cling to this winter and heading into next year.
I don't know about this winter, but
we'll see.
I mean, so the Cubs just hired former Rays minor league hitting coordinator Greg Brown, 41 years old.
Who's Greg Brown?
I've
never heard of this guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the point. And so it's like, you see the hires that they've made, GM Carter Hawkins, Essen Bakari, these younger guys that are, kind of weren't in the same roles. I mean, for all of these guys, they're getting kind of promoted into higher level positions, coming from organizations that are kind of smaller budget type organizations, typically, but that have had a lot of success. And so it's going to be real interesting to see, how the offseason goes with these guys in place, I guess. But what do you think about the hiring of Greg Brown specifically?
I love it. You know what I mean? You mentioned Bakari, who actually started out with the Dodgers and then was with the Astros. So again, you've got two very progressive organizations, both of which have had big budgets and significant development successes. You got Hawkins, who came from Cleveland, now the Guardians, and again, tons of pitching development. You ask the major industry insiders, especially those who work on the prospect side, like which organization is best at developing pitching. Cleveland would come up all the time, and then the Dodgers as well. And then you've got Brown, who again was an area scout for the Astros, scouted and signed Kike Hernandez and also JD Martinez. So both of those guys he brought in, and that was, I think, back in 2009 is when they drafted and signed those guys. Then he moved on and was at Nova Southeastern University, was a head coach there, left to join the Rays. The Rays, we know, are a pretty progressive organization as well and have done excellent things on the development side. But if you look at Bakari and Hawkins, they tend, and again, they're not pitching specific, but those guys have a lot of expertise primarily on the pitching side. Now you've got a guy who comes in on the hitting side, again, who's not only familiar with the evaluation at the very start, right? How to pick out these great young hitters. Then he worked in as a college head coach. Then he worked for the Rays as a hitting coordinator in the minors. And now he comes to a Cubs team that is going to have to do better development, not only at the minor league level. This is what I point out in the piece, because we talk about development so often. We talk just about the minor leagues and prospects, but what do we come up with time and time and time again? And what did we even say? I think we've talked about this on the show a few times, clearly prior to Brown being hired, is that the Cubs did not do a sufficient job of continuing to develop their hitters once they got to the major league level. It's kind of like, whoop, you made it. You're good. And
now you're on your own.
Like Kyle Schwarber, Ian Happ, some of those guys. Like Happ, when he made some of those changes, and I'm looking back at 2019, right, when he had to get sent back down, he had to go down there and work with Chris Valleca, who was the Cubs minor league hitting coordinator at the time, was their assistant hitting coach this past season.
Yep.
He had to go down there to fix things, right? It wasn't happening at the major league level. And I understand the complications of that because you can't really do that as easily. But I think what they're looking for is not as much someone who's going to come in there and dictate things. But I quoted or paraphrased Hawkins, who specifically on the pitching side, though, said, we've got to find all the available data that's out there. We got to get all this information, and then we've got to find a way to break that down, digest it, and then get that out to our players, so that the players, the coaching staff, the front office are all on the same page. And I think that's what we're seeing is they're better aligning their entire development infrastructure top down so that it all kind of makes sense together, which you would think should go without saying, right? But I feel like Brown is the kind of hire who is a little bit, rather than saying like, oh, this is a front office guy, or this is our buddy from here, or this is somebody who's had success over here. I think what they're looking for is someone who can help to develop and implement processes that are not only repeatable, but that also aren't just static. You can't just have, this is our philosophy, this is how we hit. No, you've got to be able to work with individual hitters and make that fit them versus making them fit your system, and vice versa. So I like it. I think it's a good move for what I think will be an improved system all the way through up to the major league level. And, again, we're going to be seeing a lot more prospects come up, a lot more young hitters. They're not going out and getting a ton of big time, $200 million stars. So,
yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing is if you look at what Jed Hoyer's doing here, he's creating structure. And so it kind of feels like he's going to take more of a traditional approach to, kind of being the president of baseball operations versus how Theo, his approach, which was very kind of hands-on, felt like he was involved in every single decision, felt like he was driving every single decision. In fact, you hardly ever heard from anybody else below him. And it feels like Hoyer's taking kind of a different approach just with how he's structuring this and with the hires that he's making. I mean, bringing these guys, these younger guys in from progressive organizations really feels like he's ready to kind of hand the keys off and let these guys manage what they're supposed to be managing, staying out of it. I'm sure he's going to be obviously part of the day-to-day operations there, but it really feels like he's setting up an organization and a structure, and he's willing to follow kind of more traditional lines of responsibility that have been done in the past. And I think if he does that, that's going to lead to more success. I think one of Theo's failings was that he always felt like, or at least it appeared that he always felt like he needed to be the driver and involved in everything. And so it was always him making that kind of the final key decision. I don't really sense that Jed is looking at it the same way. And it feels like he is really ready to, kind of let these other guys put them in place and let them do their job.
Yeah, I mean, it does look like, again, and Hoyer had talked, and this was a few years ago, I think, about the flat hierarchy and how, it's kind of open forum and whatever. But it always did feel like Theo Epstein absolutely had the final stamp of approval. And not only that, like, I don't even want to say that, because I think Hoyer will still have like the stamp of, it's not like things are getting done without his green light. But it felt more like, hey, we're going to bring these ideas to Theo, and then he's going to then kind of take over the control of the decision versus saying, hey, this is who I want. I just need you to, I just need your signature on here, Jed. Cool. I trust you. Boom.
Exactly.
And this is an oversimplification, but it did feel like, more like in the past, it would be like, I'm going to create a report to give to Theo, and then he will read my report, and then he will make the decision versus like, hey, here's what I think we should do. Cool. I agree with you. I believe in you. You're my development guy. I'm the baseball ops guy. You handle development. I will sign off on it. So that's what I felt like. So hopefully that's more the case, because I think that's just it's a much better way to do it. And it takes a lot of stuff off Jed's plate as well, and lets him focus on what he needs to do versus, Theo, I think, aged pretty quickly by those 9 years in the organization. And I think it was, I gotta think that felt like more than 9 years to him, especially toward the end. So, and that's part of it. If you do all that work, it's going to do it.
His approach aged, I think it's that it didn't, there were a lot of hires, and there were hitting coaches that came and went. There were, a couple managers that came and went.
A lot of hitting coaches that came and went. This is their seventh. This is the seventh hitting coach in the time that Hoyer has been with the Cubs.
Yeah, and so at a point in time, you have to say the approach needs to be changed a little bit. And I just don't know if the CEO, essentially, of an organization is going to be able to change his approach in a way that that would be effective in any way, shape, or form. And that was really where Theo needed to kind of bow out, and we have a new CEO, so to speak, of the organization that is taking a different approach. So I think that's healthy. But at the end of the day, there are tremendous, there's a bunch of knowns and unknowns heading into the off season, and I think looking at the revamped front office, that's kind of both, right? It's now it's known. We know who are going to what people are going to fill those positions. The unknown is really what the approach is going to look like, and it's going to look completely different than any other off season. It's definitely not going to, that we've had in recent history, and definitely since 2016. And so that I think that's exciting to think about, like that this is going to be different. This is going to be, a lot different. Who they sign, how they approach free agency is going to be different.
Yeah, well, and I think, and that's part of what, and I put this out right before we started. But there's a lot of these guys that John Gray from the Rockies, is kind of somebody's been, and it's funny because he's been connected to the Cubs for over 8 years. He was drafted immediately behind Chris Bryant, and there was a thought like if Bryant had gone number 1, then you think then Mark Appel goes number 2, and then the thought would be that the Cubs are going to draft John Gray. Like that was a lot of people had mocked him to them, or possibly that they would even pass on Bryant and draft Gray. So, and then ever since then, as he's come up, people have talked about him, and it's funny because like if you look at this dude's career numbers and then you match that up with what was the average major league starter this year, it's almost identical across the board, like ERA, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, ground ball rate, like within 2 percentage points everywhere. It's actually pretty hilarious. So then you look at it, you're thinking like, why would this, although, you're like, why would you target this dude? And then you think, wait a minute, this is the Cubs. They're looking for somebody cheap. The guy's 29 years old. You're like, mediocre pitcher, 29, probably doesn't want much money, probably doesn't want too many years. Cool. That's exactly what the Cubs are probably trying to target. But the thought or the report from the Athletic was that he wants to stay in Colorado. Like that would be his preference. But then you hear that he turned down a 3-year extension worth $35 to $40 million. So you're going, wait a minute. This dude wants more than 12 million a year, or he wants more than 3 years. And if you turn it down, damn well the Rockies are going to give him a qualifying offer. $18.4 million for the Cubs. That would mean if they sign him, they also have, in addition to paying him perhaps more than $40 million for 3 years, they have to forfeit $500,000 in international pool money and their second pick, which would be the 7th pick of the second round. Now it's not that wouldn't be the 37th overall pick because there's a comp rounds in between, whatever. They got to sort that all out. But anyway, it's a long way around saying the qualifying offer in particular, it's one thing if you're signing Carlos Correa, right? And you're saying, we're going to commit all this time to this dude. We think he's well worth giving up, $500,000 and a second round pick. But there's going to be a ton of qualifying offers this year. Like way more, I think, than what we've ever seen in the past. And part of that's the uncertainty, both sides. Teams don't know, who knows what's happening with that in the past. Teams are going to try to capitalize on that and have either a short commitment to that guy or get some picks back. But I think we're going to see a ton of those, even on some guys, again, like a Gray, maybe like a Noah Syndergaard, and some others who are in that range of where you thought the Cubs would. Maybe Nick Castellanos is going to be another one, right? To where, because he's going to turn down that option and then he's going to turn down the QO. And so all these guys, you're sitting there going like, yeah, maybe the Cubs will target this guy. Maybe they'll target this guy. But it's difficult enough for them to give up what was asked of then. And then if you sign a second guy, then you lose your third highest remaining pick. And so, giving up a couple of draft picks and $500,000 in international free agency, given what the Cubs want to do, I think they, and here's the other complicating factor. It would be one thing because you get picks back, right? If somebody signs a QO player, the Cubs aren't giving a qualifying offer to Matt Duffy or Zach Davies, right? Like that's not gonna. They don't have anybody who they can put a QO on and get any picks back. So that makes it really difficult. So when you're looking at what could the Cubs do? What is their pathway toward getting competitive, and who are some reasonable targets? And then you start thinking about how many guys, and I guarantee you it's going to be a record number of qualifying offers. And a lot of those might even get picked up. If I'm John Gray, I'm taking $18.4 million for a year. It's a hell of a lot more than he's going to get that's probably more than he'll get for 2 years from most. Anyway, I just think that's going to complicate things a lot. And that's, again, before we even consider what the collective bargaining agreement is going to do to the timing.
Exactly.
So it's wild, man. It's a lot to chew on.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot up in the air there, just in terms of knowns and unknowns, and certainly, I mean, could the Cubs not sign any free agents and just field basically, a team built off of
No,
who they currently have and their minor leagues?
no. The
I mean, they
pitching staff would be.
could.
I mean, yeah, in theory they could. I mean, hell, look at what the Marlins did. Especially when they went through that COVID stuff last year, and they had like all super young guys.
Yeah.
It could happen, but on a couple different levels. One, you want to talk about being terrible for fan service because you're rushing a bunch of guys up who shouldn't be there. And first of all, the payroll be so freaking low. It would just be again. There's you don't need to go out and spend $200 million, but if you're staying at 50, 75, like if you're running a raise budget, that's
$50 million.
Absolutely,
that'd be amazing.
Would be disgusting.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't. And the other thing is, it wouldn't provide the balance, right? That's what they need, is the kind of balance between power and contact and speed and everything else, and getting enough players across the board. So they could do it. And they could also do it by just going out and signing a bunch of scrubs that didn't get qualifying offers, that aren't really Daniel Descalso, that aren't otherwise being signed by anyone. Steven Souza Jr., some guys like that, to very minimal contracts. But and who knows, maybe, I mean, again, between all those other complicating factors, that could be it. But it would also go completely against everything they've been saying, which is that they have money not they're going to spend, again, a ton of money, but that they've got money to spend on free agents, that they will go find these guys, and that they are going to make steps to improve the team. So if they went and completely punted on this next season, it would be a very, very bad look for everyone involved, because it would just be it would make everything they said a flat out lie, like even more so than maybe just kind of stepping on the truth a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing, is that based on what they've said, they really do have to at least appear as though they're trying to be competitive, right? They couldn't just field a minor league team, because everything they said up to this point would be viewed as a blatant lie, and they definitely don't want to come off like that. And so that's where it's kind of an interesting situation, to be honest with you, is that, like, they're going to have to make some moves to appear to be competitive. Yes, they've used language like, we're going to spend intelligently, whatever that means. I don't know. Does that mean we're not going to spend a lot of money? Does that mean we're going to get free agents who are undervalued? I mean, it's just that's open. That's like political speak, as far as I'm concerned. And so it's like, when you look at it, you'd have to say they're going to have to try to at least appear as though they're making decisions to be competitive. It's just, man, that's like a tightrope they're going to be walking this season.
Well, and I think here the other thing to consider is, like, do we really think, like, is Milwaukee going to repeat the magic from the starting pitchers? Are they all going to be just, maybe they will be, right? But are they going to be as good again? Like, what do the Cardinals do? The Cardinals just keep getting older. At some point, that stops being effective, right? Like, Yadi Molina is 59 years old, and Adam Wainwright is 64, and they're both going to be back. Like, they're paying Waino more next year than they did this year on his new deal. I mean, hell, they added J Happ and John Lester at the trade deadline, and those two still weren't the oldest pitchers on their staff, which is just wild to me. Those are the three guys over the age of 48 or whatever. But you don't need to do, like, Cincinnati's going to suck, right? Castellanos is gone. Joey Votto is clearly fading there. We'll see what they do. I seriously doubt Wade Miley's got a $10 million option. Highly doubt they pick that up. Tucker Barnhart, $7.5 million option. Highly doubt they pick that up. And I would be willing to bet that he doesn't want him to pick him up. He probably wants to get the hell out of there, because what's the talent that they've got around there? They're done. Pittsburgh, ideally, you would think that they would be trying to improve, and they are trying to improve. I know John Baker would not go to that organization to work as their minor league coordinator if they weren't seriously looking to improve. Yeah. But those two teams still are going to suck. So you don't even have to try, and you can finish third. No, you don't have to try too hard. But with just a little bit of effort, you could legitimately compete. And again, so I look at this a few different ways, right? Things broke different ways. The Cubs had a shitty rotation, and it wouldn't have mattered. But when they traded Jock Peterson, they were 2 games under 500. The Braves were 1 game under 500. The Cardinals were also 2 games under 500. What did the Cardinals do? They went on a tremendous run late in the season. And, again, they got better pitching than what we saw from the Cubs. But the Cubs and the Cardinals had the exact same record at the trade deadline when Peterson was sent away. And the Braves were only a half game better. So it doesn't take a lot. You have to do the right moves. But what if the Cubs had made a couple of those correct moves right there? What if they had picked up a couple of pitchers?
But I think the difference between the Cubs and those other teams is that the Cubs had so many guys that were going to be free agents.
Oh, no, absolutely. But my point is that there's not, it's not like this tremendous gulf between tanking and getting the 7th pick and then actually being competitive for it. You can make a couple, and so they've got to redo some of that stuff now going forward, but it doesn't take, it's not like they've got to sign 15 players and spend $200 million to make themselves competitive in the Central next year.
Yeah, at the end, they saw that they should have saw this coming back in 2015, 2016, and they should have made some moves like we talked about on the last episode to prevent being in a situation where the bulk of their team was going to be free agents at the end of the year. That was the biggest failing, and that goes on Theo. Knowns and unknowns. Obviously, we talked about the CBA, big unknown. I don't think we really even need to talk about that. World Series champion. Who is it?
Oh man, it's weird because somebody pointed this out that like Houston so far they've had the identical outcomes win-loss as the Cubs did in 2016 so far, Division Series, Championship Series, and currently here in the World Series. And I feel like they've got, after those initial ones, I feel like they've got some of that momentum. I'm not completely sold on Max Fried, although if Fried comes out and pitches like he did in the regular season, I think that puts the Braves in a much better spot. But, boy, it sure feels like one of those things where the Astros kind of weathered that early storm and that the Braves maybe punched themselves out a little bit, especially after, like, dude, if you hit a first inning grand slam and then just end up getting walloped after that, woo, that is, oh my goodness. Atlanta's going to figure out a way, I think, to squeak out one of these games, though. I don't know. I don't see Houston pulling it all the way out, but it would not surprise me either way.
I'm going with Houston.
Yeah, they're just better. They're just a better team. But you never know.
They are.
Who knows?
Atlanta shouldn't even be there, really, but they are. Okay. So, anyways, so MLB, you had written a piece about Major League Baseball and perhaps suggesting that they could make rule changes to limit this kind of merry-go-round of pitchers that happens in the playoffs, and specifically referencing when manager Brian Snitker of the Atlanta Braves pulled AJ Minter, or pulled Ian Anderson for AJ Minter, with Anderson, having pitched through the 5th. It was the beginning of the 6th. He had 76 pitches and 1-0 lead, a no-hitter going. But you look at the result, and the bullpen only gave up 2 singles after that, held on to a 2-0 lead, and it kind of worked. 3rd time through the order. So it wasn't as blatant of kind of a pull as we've seen in the past. I mean, there's this romantic kind of ideology that goes along with no hitters, but I think that goes completely out the window in the playoffs. Is a no hitter just doesn't matter in the playoffs. I mean, maybe it matters. Maybe if they could do it, it would matter, but that's not the goal, And so in a 162 game season, you can keep a guy in there and not really worry about kind of how bad he's fading or, whether he's just going to get past the finish line or not. In a 7-game series, you've got to win the game.
Yeah. And what was really funny, and that piece got a ton of engagement. It was hilarious too, because I never with anything before, you always have this, like, put stuff out and we, tweet it out on, we put it out on Twitter, put it out on Facebook. And Facebook's notorious for this, right? People will read a headline and then they'll just get really mostly upset. Like nobody ever comes in there and they're like, I totally agree with this headline. They're always like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
idiot. What are you talking about, you moron? And first of all, it's like, it's a question. It doesn't say MLB should make rule changes. It's asking a question. Could MLB make rules? Because we've heard about this for the longest time. Moving back the mound, lowering the mound, putting runners on, changing different things. We've seen the rule change to where you've got to have a 3-batter minimum. MLB has already made rules changes to dictate the stuff around pitching and game times and things like that. So it's hilarious that with the question, like, dozens of people were super pissed and referring to me as an idiot for advocating rules change when in fact at 2 points, twice in the piece, they also got mad that I was using Alex Rodriguez as an example. I was like, no, I was using you. I said, this is silly. But anyway, twice I said winning is far more important than quote unquote entertainment value, right? Because at the end of the day, the Braves and Brian Snitker don't give a shit whether the fans watching on TV are happy with the way this worked out or whether they got to see a no-hitter. They want the win, and that's how it should always be. However, a lot of what we're seeing, right, is that like these games have taken forever. These World Series games are running on. Like, I watched Monday Night Football last night, and it was done at like 11:15 or whatever. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to be in bed before 11:30. This is wild. I haven't gotten to bed before midnight watching the World Series games because they're starting after 8 o'clock over here, and they're running over 4 hours long because you're there, and they're changing. And a part of this again is this: that you go long series. We do see starters go shorter periods of time. A lot of people are using openers, and some of that was the timing, right? So I don't know where you go with it. Some people have said, well, if you have the starter has to face at least this many. Some idiot said you have to mandate a starter goes 9 innings. Just unless he's injured.
That's great.
Like, yeah,
that's a take.
Well, Nolan Ryan never. I was like, yeah, it was also not mandated that he go 9 innings. That's
back in the 70s.
Yeah,
40 years ago.
And even then it was only because they could, and you just had different structure. So I mean, unless you're limiting certain things, but there's so much stuff when you start limiting those, and you say, well, you've got to go at least this long. Well, now you're saying, okay, well, this dude just doesn't have it today. And so we got to leave him out there for 3 innings, even though he sucks and that's going to cost us the game. No, you got to be able to pull him. And so I think a lot of it is just that things have become just the game changes. It becomes more hyper specialized, and that's simply the way it goes. And if you're trying to win, again, Herm Edwards, credit, you play to win the game. And whatever the rules are, they're still going to find ways to work within them to get that change. I think the issue then becomes, can you do some of this stuff without having the game last 4 hours, which I suppose is great for advertisers, but like run some ads in the meantime. Like, don't break away for commercials. If nothing else, like, let's watch this guy warm up. Let's hasten this stuff between innings. Like, don't break away the whole time for commercials. Run some ads as these guys are changing in and out. And so that way, at least we're not away from the game. You can move those things going. So it's, I don't know where you go with it. I just think it's kind of funny that again, they're just like, I just still think it's funny that people got pissed that I was trying to change rules. I was like, no, that's actually all you got to do is like read a paragraph into it.
Just read a little. Welcome, Paul Curry, new here. Thank you for saying that. That's very nice. He said he enjoys our take on Cubs matters.
Paul's my favorite viewer and listener already.
I enjoy
screw the rest of you
too, Evan.
I like Paul.
I mean, it's just when you start talking about rule changes and all this stuff, it seems like, of all the professional sports, Major League Baseball, it continually tries to change the rules and tinker with things, and all the while you've got valuations for MLB teams are going through the roof, and so it's like I get like the games are super long, but I mean, to me, like the World Series, the playoffs, the Major League Baseball playoffs, it's so much more interesting than the Super Bowl because it is a story. It unfolds. You have to pay attention to it. You have to know what's going on in the story in order to really appreciate the whole thing. But when you get into it, it is an evolving thing. It takes, 10 days to kind of unwrap and to see the outcome. And it's just, I love that about baseball. So, I mean, I don't have a problem where, listen, people are trying to win and they are going to be doing things that are, aren't conventional. And that's great. That's good. It may not be great for the, for the typical viewer, I suppose, but, and especially the World Series, you're trying to get people to watch who maybe don't usually watch. I get that, but I think as a purist, I'm fine with it. I love watching all the different things that these managers try to come up with, except for last year where they pulled what was it in Game 7? The Tampa Bay manager pulled the starting pitcher.
Yeah, he pulled Snell.
Oh, was it 6?
Yeah, and they were
that made no sense to me.
Yeah, they were ahead 1-0. He walked the guy, and then immediately the reliever came in. I think gave up a hit in a while. It was like very, very similar to 2016 Game 7.
Yeah, Hendricks.
When Hendricks got pulled when he was cruising, but he issued a walk. Was it a walk? Yeah. And then Lester came in, and then you had the hit. You had the error from Ross. You had the wild pitch that donked off his head, and 2 runs come in to score. It was very similar, and so and
that's managers just out thinking themselves. That's them getting in a situation, feeling all the pressure.
Yeah.
And making decisions they normally just would not make.
Right. And the difference there in both of those situations, and first of all, Joe Madden even said, and we knew it was going to be John Lester, and said he wasn't going to bring him into a dirty inning. Well, then he brings him into a dirty inning. And Kevin Cash
and it spiked that ball right up a David Ross mask. And David Ross was like almost knocked out.
Yeah.
Didn't know where the ball was.
Stumbling around, 2 runs coming.
Runners are circling the bases.
You're like, what is going on? It looked like a Little League game.
It did.
But
in the World Series,
in the instance of Game 6, last year, again, it was a similar deal. You had the starter was cruising. He gives up a walk. There's a run on base. The reliever comes in, hit, wild pitch, runs come in to score. LA takes a 2-1 lead, and they win the series, which is opposite. In the Cubs case, they ended up coming, they were up 5-1, and then it's 5-3. Lester finally gets out of the inning. But then that set up again for the Indians to come back, and we all know how that worked. But so the final result's what matters. But I think the difference then with Snitker was that, as you said, Anderson had gone through 5 clean innings, but to start the 6th was the top of the order, third time through. They knew he wasn't going to get a complete game anyway. But I mean, at the time, you could look at it and be like, hey, he's cruising. But there's a difference between, and here's where it's like, well, we could send him out there and then we'll pull him at the first sign of trouble. Yeah, but that first sign of trouble might be really bad. Like, oh, he got to walk. Well, now you've got a runner on base, and now you're bringing this other dude into this super pressure-packed situation where, and that's what.
In a 2-0 game.
Right, and that's, so if you do that
one
versus
walk,
bringing that reliever in clean and saying, we're not going to give you the chance to screw this up at all, or we're not going to test fate. We're not going to test this third time through the order thing. I know what I've got. I know my players. Come in a clean inning. Let's go. And so, it's just a matter of how those things all work out and what situation specifically are you bringing this guy into. It was absolutely the right move. I still don't agree that Matt, and as PKF here notes, again, Hendricks had thrown a strike earlier that was a bad call. Like, that should have been a strikeout. It shouldn't have been a walk at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at it going like, Hendricks wasn't struggling. That walk wasn't even his fault. Like, he's still good, man. Let him roll, because and he's kind of a different pitcher from a lot of guys who get the third time through. Generally, he's much worse early on, and then he settles in. And so that move still to this day, just and not only are you bringing in that case, not only are you bringing in a new pitcher, you're bringing in a new catcher. You brought in a whole new battery.
Yeah. Just thinking back, that game. Speaking of drama, that game was like 3 games in one. Yeah. It was the Cubs blew out the Indians. That was one game. And then the next game was Madden making terrible decisions. And then the final game was the Cubs winning an amazingly close game.
Yeah, it was that was a lot.
It was,
and so like to this day, I'll say that was the wrong move. I don't, and even though they won, I think Cash made the wrong move in that one. I think he kind of overthought himself. But I think Snicker, oddly enough, again, having a guy with a no, made the right move. And that's not entirely dependent upon wins and losses, because again, in one of them they won, and I still don't think it was right. But at the end of the day, you also look at it and say, well, they won the game, although they won it because they gave up their lead and had to come back and win it later. So the other two did not have the same situation. But I think we're seeing now, like, the game's going to start and they're probably going to have guys up in the bullpen. That's what game 5 was like. That they had pitchers in the bullpen in the first inning ready to go because they knew that's what they're going to have. And you're really going to see them, I think, empty it out, because with the day off, those bullpens are fresh. You do have a guy like Anderson who didn't go that extra inning, who only threw 76 pitches, so they could get an inning out of him. We saw what Urquidy pitched an inning or two in relief the other day. So, I mean, it's all hands on deck, literally, which, again, I don't have a problem with. Again, I think there are things baseball could make more organic changes, versus saying, oh, we have to implement this new clock. We have to do these different things. Just shorten the breaks between innings. These guys don't need, all this time between. Get them out there. If the pitcher's warm, which he will be from having pitched, or he's come out of the bullpen, like, give him a few warm-up tosses. Let's go. Run some commercials off to the side there. That's fine. I don't need to be pulled away for 2 minutes to see 4 whole-ass commercials.
Exactly.
Pull people in here and let's run. And if nothing else, like, here's my thought. You tell me if this makes any sense. Let's say you're watching two things. Let's say it's Thursday, okay, and you're a big football fan. Your football team's playing on Thursday Night Football, and you've got the World Series on, and there are 2 teams playing in the World Series. So you love baseball, but you still don't have any direct attachment to those teams. What are you going to do between innings? Pitching change. You're going to flip back over to that Thursday Night Football game, right? Because, I got to, Bears playing Thursday Night Football. I got to check in on. But what if now they're driving and they're doing something exciting? You don't want to flip back now. Now you're stuck on the football game. Well, hey, MLB, what if, and maybe it doesn't have to be every inning, you shorten up the in-between innings breaks and you run that ad overlaid in the corner, or you small box the actual game or the in-between stuff and the announcers, and you have that ad running down there. And now you haven't broken away from the action, and now you've shortened it, so I have less time to flip away and have my attention pulled away by another program. It would actually behoove them to do that. You could probably charge more, because those advertisers are going to have more guaranteed eyeballs on their product during that time, versus giving people more of an excuse to flip away for that period, especially if they know that in those middle innings, it's going to take 3 hours to get through the 2nd to the 7th innings, and that there's all this stuff like, I can flip it on later. I could follow it. Because that's what I do. I sure as shit flip away from that for a while if there's some stuff going, because I can follow it on my phone. There's so many other ways that I have that I can clue myself into whether or not I need to come back to that game and pay attention to it. That there are a lot of things that baseball does that are counterintuitive, and I feel like there are a lot of other changes they could make without having to, artificially shift the rules around to try to get people interested. It's like, or here's the other thing, and I know this may be a little bit different for folks like yourself, and your time is a little bit different, but as I mentioned earlier, if you start that game after 8 o'clock, right? They've had 8:09, 8:15 start times, which is really, it starts after that. The games aren't getting over till after midnight for East Coast time zone folks, of whom I am one. And I'm not, my son's not staying up that late. He's got school and other stuff. Like, and he doesn't give a shit about the Braves and the Astros. Like, he likes baseball and he likes watching the games with me, but I'm sending his ass to bed. If the Cubs are playing, it'd be different. But if you're trying to grow that fan base and get people involved in different players versus just a specific team and getting to know who these guys are, I think it does make more sense to start some of those games earlier, particularly on the weeknights, and just get those things, because again, it's stretching, dude. It's like 12:30, 1 o'clock. We're still trying to watch baseball, and it's tough for me, and I want to watch, but baseball's dumb.
So one way or the other, the season's going to end tonight or tomorrow night. And once it ends, key dates start rolling off. Free agency is going to kick in, and qualifying offers are going to need to be made shortly thereafter. or as free agency begins. And so a lot of things are going to be happening over this next month is going to be real interesting because the CBA is going to be front and center. We're going to see if anybody's going to sign as a free agent before the expiration of the CBA, which is, I think, December 1st.
Yep.
And so we'll have a lot to talk about. We'll have a lot to talk about when we circle back with you guys next week. But until then, I've got to bounce. And let's just hope it's a good game. I hope it's a good game tonight. I hope Houston wins tonight for sure. Game sevens are always fun.
Game seven's and you know, it's as fun as it is to watch your team win a game 7. That I hate like all the. It's so much simpler when it's somebody else having to play a game 7.
No doubt
you don't
about
have the
that.
anxiety to it. It's easy. It's a lot of fun when you win, but boy, can it suck for the time kind of going into that. So we'll see what happens. But I'm rooting for a game 7 and to have some fun and just to see some wild stuff. So who knows? Should be fun.
We'll circle back with you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.